Hi everybody, Niall Paterson here with the Sky News Daily. Do hope that you've had a lovely weekend. First up this week, we're taking a look at weight loss. Well, specifically a drug that causes weight loss called Wegovy. It's been approved by NICE, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, essentially in this instance the drugs regulator, and it should have started being prescribed by weight loss clinics across England and Wales last December. Instead, Sky News has found out that many patients entitled to Wegovy are having to wait months or are simply not getting the drug at all. Thomas Moore is our science correspondent and he is back on the podcast. But let's start with the basics. I mean, Wegovy, what is it? How does it work?
Wegovy has a pharmaceutical twin, Ozempic.
The celebrities have been taking it.
Yeah, exactly. The one that people are using to cut a nice svelte figure on the red carpet. And it was being heavily abused because that was a drug which was intended for people with diabetes. But then pharmaceutical companies found in clinical trials that they lost weight too. And that's why it became a huge thing with A-listers on TikTok and that kind of stuff. And people with diabetes really struggled to get the medication they needed to keep their blood sugar under control. So Novo Nordisk, the Danish pharmaceutical company behind these drugs, issued a second one, this Wegovy, which was targeted at people who were trying to lose weight. And those are the two drugs that we're talking about here. And they have completely taken the world by storm. So Novo Nordisk is now actually worth more than the Danish economy.
So how does it work?
This is a mimic of a hormone released in the gut, and that is an appetite regulating hormone. So it sends a message up to the brain, says, I've eaten enough now, let's just call an end to dinner time now. It short circuits that, and people feel fuller, faster, and for longer.
And your research, Thomas, has actually shown there are people out there who are in desperate need of this drug, but they're not getting it. Take an example, Ken Pollock. Now, he needs to lose weight in order to have surgery.
I suppose I've been on and off dieting for many years, and I've managed to lose 3 stone. Dieting as you get older becomes more and more difficult. My weight then started to go up and up. I think it was following a road accident where I had a bit of trauma, and it just it's getting far too much and I'm struggling with it. But really the bottom line is I've made lifestyle changes. I eat sensibly. I don't eat big crazy meals. So the weight issue to me isn't I can't stop eating. That's not the issue at all. I think the biggest issue is my knees are kind of wrecked now and I'm too sedentary. I can't do all the things I used to love. I'd specifically said I want to get onto this to get the medication because that will help me more than anything else. I've been through weight loss programs before and they don't really work for me. And the first response was, you can't have it. I'm at a bit of a loss because I'm very angry. I'm very frustrated. I'm not getting any real communication. There's no plan. I'm just sitting here thinking, well, what's next? I've done everything I can, as proactive as I can. I'm not really getting support or care. So I sort of considered purchasing it or going private, but I thought, no, I've paid into the NHS all my life and I've hardly ever been in hospital. So I'm stuck in a kind of quandary in a loop. I don't know what's next. I don't know what I can afford. And at the moment, I'm drowning.
He needs a double knee replacement. He has osteoarthritis. One factor behind that will be his body weight. But he used to be a really active man, played golf, went walking, certainly enjoyed travelling with his wife and so on. So not somebody who was just on the couch the whole time. He was up on his feet, but slowly the weight added up over the years, and he found it more and more difficult to move when the osteoarthritis kicked in. And now he's in such pain that he can barely get up the stairs. And so he went to his GP, went through the NHS, and they said, look, you need to lose 5 stone. He weighs 25, so it's a big part of his body weight that he needs to lose before the surgeon will consider giving him the operation just because of the risks of the general anaesthetic and so on. So they don't like to operate on people who are carrying an awful lot of weight. So he had to lose weight. So he did the right thing. So he tried to diet. He bought an exercise bike, but he tore a ligament in his knee after about 4 pedals on his bike. So he can't move. He cannot lose the weight he needs to qualify for the operation that would be life-changing for him and allow him to exercise again, let's face it.
Why then has he not got it? I just don't get it.
It is completely down to restrictions within his hospital weight loss clinic. So he was referred by his GP, who agreed that he did qualify. The GP put on the referral form a cross in the box that said this person needs a weight to lose weight to qualify for an operation. That should have made him a higher priority within the NHS. But back came a text, not even a letter or a phone call, just a text, which said, look, I'm afraid it's going to be a 2-year wait to even get seen in the weight loss clinic, and we can't prescribe drugs. Is it as blunt as that? That was really his last hope. He doesn't know what to do now, whether he should be buying it privately or just waiting for the NHS to change its mind.
That is the calculation that I would have thought, that of the over 13,000 people who are entitled to this, there would be over 12,000 who have yet to get their hands on it. Plenty of them will be weighing up whether or not they can afford to go private. I mean, one individual you've been speaking to, Sally Hardwick, she made that positive decision to get the drug, and I think it's worked out well for her.
So I've always done dieting clubs. I've done them all. I was at the end of my tether, where I went to the doctors and asked for help, really. I was lost, depressed, lost. You're wearing the same clothes because they fit. I was suffering from swollen ankles, because I had no motivation to move around at all. And that's when I then thought, you know what, I would really like to go for the weight loss injection. I've read forums, I'd watched TikToks, I'd been following people, and you saw them, the ups and downs with it, and you saw them shrinking. And I thought, you know what, that's what I want. And I knew it wasn't going to be an easy ride, because it's not just a miracle weight loss. You do have to work with it and eat properly and look after yourself. But I thought, I've tried the diet clubs, this may be the one that is going to get me where I want to be. It's not cheap, and I didn't even know at the start how much it was going to cost. I just knew that I needed to do something, and whatever that may have been. So that was just an afterthought, the price, really, because I thought, let's find it all out first, and then I'll have to find a way of funding it, which is what I did.
So how much have you lost?
3 stone 4 pounds.
And that's over what, 10 months? Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
Oh, it's amazing. I haven't got any food noise. I don't have hunger pains. And what I'd noticed on previous diets is I never used to feel full. I could eat a very big meal and still want more. Well, now my food is on much smaller plates, and 9 times out of 10 I don't even finish what I've got. A couple of mouthfuls and I'm satisfied. And I feel full, where I've never had that feeling before. So it was quite bizarre at the start of my journey with the weight loss drugs, the injection, that to have that full feeling that I hadn't had for 49 years.
It costs anything between £160 and £200 a month to use Wegovy, and she's not loaded herself. She needs help from her dad to be able to buy this, but she has tried everything else. She's been on every diet you can really think of, and it hasn't worked for a few weeks, and then it's difficult to stick to a diet. As soon as she stops, the weight comes back, and so on. So, but it has made a phenomenal difference to her. I think she's lost 3 or 4 stone, and for her it's transformational. She feels better, she feels she looks better, her skin looks better, hair, and for everything she feels so much better. She can consider buying clothes, a wardrobe that she never thought she'd be in until she started using Wegovy.
So is this a drug that Sally and others would anticipate taking in perpetuity, a means by which they can not just lose weight, but get to a point where they can regulate it?
Yeah, this is the difficulty. So, this is a drug which reduces appetite, and the studies show that if you stop taking the drug, in time that weight will come back in most people. And so the suggestion is that the NHS, which at the moment limits to 2 years the length of time that you can take it, that it will have to either allow people to take it for life, just as they do for statins or blood pressure drugs and so on, or whether they cycle on and off. They go back up and to a certain weight, and then they start Wegovy again, yo-yo dieting in effect. I guess there have to be some questions over whether that's fair on people, whether it's healthy, or whether it's better to be taking this drug long term. And there is a big debate, not just in doctors, but health economists too, on how best this drug should be used.
Thomas, hold that thought. We're going to take a very quick break at this point. When we return, Thomas and I will continue to discuss exactly that point, the way in which we as a country and our health service deal with obesity. Back in a moment. Welcome back to The Daily. Our science correspondent Thomas Moore still here, talking us through Wegovy, the weight loss drug, or rather the lack of availability of Wegovy. I mean, Thomas, before the break, we were discussing that the idea that this might end up being something that people take in perpetuity, or at least for an extended period of time. Does that then mean that this drug hasn't solved the underlying issues for what that people have? That there is still going to be a desire to not eat well, to not exercise as much, to make bad lifestyle decisions that have put them in the position of being significantly obese in the first place.
There's a lot to unpack in that question.
Yeah, sorry, Thomas.
100% this only treats the symptoms. But in the same way that people taking asthma drugs are treating the symptoms. The cause of asthma might be poor air quality, air pollution and so on. You're not dealing with that. You're just treating sick people with lungs which can't cope with that poor air. So in the same way, these drugs are treating a symptom of our environment, of our genetics, the way that some people are set up to be. So let's be clear. It's not as easy for some people to lose weight as it is for others. So yeah, diet and exercise at its core is going to help people to maintain a healthy weight. But between 40 and 70% of the risk of obesity is determined by the genes we get from our parents. There's also psychological factors. So people have been through big stressful life events, they are more likely to comfort eat and end up with carrying an awful lot of weight. And then of course there is the environment we're living in. All those chicken shops you talked about, all the fact that you can have fast food delivered to your home, you don't have to leave the house anymore. Temptation is there the whole time, and for some people it's much more difficult to resist than others. So I think, yes, we are medicalising obesity by using these drugs, but at the same time, bear in mind that obesity is really dangerous. So one, it costs the NHS 6 billion quid a year, but it's also linked to 200 different diseases. If you are severely obese and you've got 3 medical conditions related to that weight, so that could be diabetes or blood pressure and so on, your risk of dying in the next 10 years is 50%. Now that is as big as it is for some cancers. But we wouldn't quibble over giving people cancer drugs.
But haven't we already seen this reflected in the way that the medical profession, the NHS, talks about obesity? You and I are old enough to remember where it was very much a finger-wagging approach. This is self-inflicted. You've done it to yourself. You can sort it out. And let's be fair, there are plenty of people out there who have, through their own willpower and exercise, sorted out their weight issues. But you look at the health service at the moment, and people are talking about this as an illness rather than something which has been self-inflicted.
Yeah, look, I think we've all been on a bit of a learning journey with obesity.
Absolutely.
And doctors and nurses are no different to that. When they went to medical school, they were told that people just needed to get off their backsides and control what they're eating, and assumed that everybody was in the same boat, and therefore you were lazy if you couldn't do it. It's not true. And I think obesity specialists now are much more willing to recognise that some people really struggle with their weight, and telling them to get on with it just ain't going to work. And that although you do need to do something about your lifestyle, at the same time as you are on these drugs, maybe having counselling to try and resolve those underlying mental health issues that can fuel an eating desire, then that is what the NHS is going to have to do. And at the moment, it just doesn't have the clinics or the personnel to deliver that kind of care. And as one specialist told me, we just have to man up and spend the money.
Now we have drugs available that can, within months, reduce people's weight by a significant percentage, and we're not using them. And again, I still don't really understand why that's the case, Thomas. I mean, you mentioned those
prejudice.
Yeah, well,
prejudice.
But you mentioned those obesity consultants. Dr. Jonathan Hazelhurst, he was very explicit as to why he thinks the situation is as it is.
None of us have met anybody in the weight management clinic who hasn't tried pretty well everything that's going, and some things extremely extreme, in order to try and get the weight down. They're desperately trying hard. What they're struggling with is when they start to lose weight, they get the hunger. Some of them have genetic predisposition that make that hunger even worse. And you just can't ignore hunger. Hunger is not something that you humanly can ignore. We've never provided programs that help them stop gaining weight. So I think what we've got to do is we've got to treat the problem that we didn't treat, and we've got to just man up and spend that money. And what we then got to do is, I think what the Labour government are now talking about, which is great to see, is that part of the NHS is preventing diseases. And we need to actually now put the money into making sure the environment's right. We need to make sure that food industries can't get away with cheap, poor quality food, and that the best food that you get is cheap, and stop the new problem coming.
It does come down to stigma and prejudice, and the fact that we haven't really taken this seriously in the past. And now, for the first time, really, we have a drug medication where you can deliver really good care. It's important to say we have had surgery for quite a while, bariatric surgery to make the stomach smaller, and that lasts for life. It's a bigger upfront cost. So surgery will cost several £1,000s. So it's a bigger upfront cost than these new drugs. But the NHS has never really rolled it out in a big way. It's always put huge limitations on who qualifies. So people haven't had proper access to this. But those who do get access have a life-transforming event.
Speaking as someone who has over the years had his own issues with his weight, I still find myself somewhat concerned that we are heading towards a time where the norm for regulating your weight and regulating your health is not good diet and exercise. It's taking Wegovy, it's taking Ozempic, it's taking, frankly, the easy way out.
But would you say that with blood pressure or with statins? Or many other drugs that we take? We could do something about our cancer risk because it's not all down to genetics or bad luck. A lot of it is to do with what we do, whether we, enjoy lying on a sunbed or drinking that little bit or smoking. There are the sins of modern life do have an effect in so many different ways. And who decides which ones qualify for drugs on the NHS?
I take your point. I take your point, but when it comes to cancer, there are a multitude of causes for it. Yeah. If you eat 10 big cakes, you're going to put on weight.
Yeah, but what drives you to eat those 10 big cakes? Some people find they don't have that willpower, and that can be because of psychological issues, or it can be because the genes that we have that control everything from desire to the ability to exercise, or there can be so many different factors that make it harder for some people to resist those cakes.
So when we look at the situation at the moment, the NHS clearly under-prescribing this, and as you've already mentioned, the postcode lottery element, if you're in certain parts of the country, you've got a greater chance of getting access to it. I mean, what is the NHS saying?
So the NHS says that it's doing what it can to make these drugs available and affordable. And the challenge really has been, at the moment, Wegovy is only available through specialist hospital clinics, and there just aren't enough of those. There is a new drug called Mounjaro, and NICE has said that this is a drug that can safely be prescribed by GPs. And that would, of course, cut out the whole need for referral to scant resources in hospital. And there's plenty of GPs, of course. So you just pop along, you get your jab, and it is even better than Wegovy. You lose about 20% of your body weight. It is phenomenal. The pounds just fall away. But NHS England has already kicked back, and there's now a consultation out on whether there should be these extra restrictions that the NHS wants. So that, the NHS says it will give this drug to 1.6 million people, but not for another 12 years. That it wants to roll this drug out that slowly just because it cannot meet demand.
Well, we hope they might get it into people's hands just slightly quicker than that, Thomas? Thomas Moore, thanks very much indeed.
Cheers.
And that is almost it for today. But before you go, you might just have heard the former First Minister of Scotland, the former leader of the SNP, Alex Salmond, died at the weekend. And despite me being something of a grizzled old newsman, turns out his death had something of an effect on me. Perhaps it's not that surprising. This was, after all, the man who got what was supposed to be impossible, a referendum on Scotland's independence. And I was there reporting for Sky back in 2014. I remember it as a bruising campaign, but obviously one where Alex Salmond ultimately came up short. Still, he almost got there. And the independence movement, which frankly in my younger years served as little more than a sideshow to Scottish Labour, well, it changed the political landscape of my homeland forever. None of which is to say that there weren't significant questions about the man behind the politician. His behaviour in private certainly didn't always live up to the easy charm and quick wit he loved to wield in public. He will not be remembered as the nicest man in politics. But he will be remembered. Politicians often like to talk about legacy. Precious few ever achieve one. Yep, he may not have freed the nation from the shackles of pernicious Westminster, as he liked to characterise Scotland's place in the Union. But he did change Scotland's course, its future. And how many can say that? As the Scottish toast goes, damn few, and they are indeed. The Daily's back again tomorrow. We'll see you then.